Hey guys, tonight we slip into a humid night in the lowland jungles of present-day Guatemala, and the year is around 750 CE. The torches flicker across limestone walls that rise above the treetops, massive step pyramids that you can't help but crane your neck at. The air is heavy with the smell of copal incense, its smoke curling into the black sky studded with stars so bright you wonder if you're looking through a hole in the roof of the universe. You're squeezed in among thousands of villagers in the great plaza of Tikal, everyone buzzing, whispering, waiting for their king to appear at the top of the pyramid. Musicians pound turtle shells, conch trumpets blare, and children tug at their mothers' skirts, more interested in roasted maize cakes than in cosmic destiny. And then you remember you probably won't survive this. The mosquitoes alone are enough to take you down, and if not, the sheer chaos of city life in a jungle empire could finish you off pretty quick. Still, you've got the best seat in the house to watch one of the greatest civilizations on Earth at its height, and it's coming unraveling. Before we go further, here's your call to action. If you're enjoying this dive into the Maya collapse, how a civilization vanished, hit that like button and subscribe for more bedtime history. And hey, post your location and the local time in the comments. Let's see where in the world you're tuning in from and how late you're staying up with us. Alright, get comfortable because tonight you're about to walk through the rise and fall of the Maya. Sweet dreams if you can hold them, because this story is filled with kings, droughts, wars, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. The city you stand in now, Tikal, is only one of dozens scattered across the Maya lowlands. If you climb high enough, maybe up the steep staircase of Temple 4, you'd see a canopy stretching endlessly, with other pyramids poking through the jungle like stone mountains. Down below, the city is alive. Traders push through the crowds with bundles of cacao beans, the real money of the day, while artisans set out obsidian blades that glint red in the firelight. The streets are not paved but worn by centuries of footsteps, and the homes are wattle and daub huts, each with a cooking fire smouldering out front. And yet, towering over it all, are the stone palaces and stepped pyramids, decorated with stucco masks of gods that grin down at you like they know something you don't. For the Maya, these cities are not just human settlements. They're living, breathing maps of the cosmos. Each temple lines up with the stars, with the movements of the sun, with the sacred calendar. When the king walks out on the pyramid platform above you, he's not just a man, he's the thread tying heaven, earth, and the underworld together. But let's not forget, behind all the grandeur, this city is crowded, noisy, and maybe just a little bit dangerous. Disease spreads easily in close quarters. Food is precious. You depend on the farmers who trek in from the countryside with their baskets of maize, beans, and squash. And the constant hum of mosquitoes. Yeah, malaria is probably waiting around every corner. You'd better hope your immune system is up for the challenge. Now picture the daily rhythm here. Dawn breaks with the sound of roosters. Yes, chickens made it into the Maya world long before the Spanish, though turkeys and dogs are the main domestic animals. Farmers head to their fields carrying stone axes and digging sticks. Women prepare tortillas on flat clay griddles, while children fetch water in clay jars from the nearest reservoir. And through it all, the city hums with a sense of order, like every person knows their place in a system that stretches back centuries. Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, Palenque. These names aren't random. Each is a capital of a dynasty, locked in an endless chess game with rivals. But here in Tikal, you're standing at the center of one of the most powerful kingdoms of the classic Maya world. The rulers here command armies, oversee massive construction projects, and host rituals that bind thousands of people together in a shared story. Look around and you'll notice something else. Writing. The Maya developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the ancient world. Stone monument stelae dot the plazas, each carved with glyphs that record the deeds of kings. Some brag about victories in war. Others describe elaborate bloodletting ceremonies. A few even hint at times of hardship, though rulers are careful never to dwell too much on failure. And here's where you see the brilliance of the Maya. They're astronomers, architects, mathematicians, and historians, all rolled into one. The calendar system they use is so precise that they can predict solar eclipses centuries in advance. They measure time with multiple overlapping cycles, so every day carries sacred meaning. Imagine living in a world where your birthday isn't just about cake, it's about destiny, marked in stone. But if you zoom out from the bright lights of tonight's ceremony, you'll notice that this prosperity is balanced on a knife's edge. The population is growing, the land around the city is being cleared for crops, and the kings are under constant pressure to prove their divine power by building bigger temples, winning bigger wars, and feeding more mouths. It's a fragile system, even if it doesn't look like it now. Standing in this plaza, with torches blazing and drums pounding, you'd swear the Maya could go on forever. But hidden in the shadows are the cracks that will eventually bring it all down. Of course, none of that matters to the little boy at your side, munching on his maize cake, or the noble woman with jade beads around her neck, or the priest smearing his blood on bark paper as an offering to the gods. For them, this is life at its fullest. For you, it's a front row seat to the beginning of a story about how even the mightiest civilizations can vanish. And so, as the king steps out onto the pyramid platform, torchlight catching his elaborate feathered headdress, the crowd roars. He raises his arms, the conch shells blast again, and for a moment, everything feels eternal. But you know better. Because tonight we're starting a journey into how the Maya, at their peak, began a long, slow collapse that would change the world forever. You leave the crowded plaza behind and wander toward the edges of the city, where the noise of drums fades, and the air smells less of incense and more of wet earth and maize gruel. Here is where the real backbone of Maya civilization works day and night. The farmers, without them, the kings would have no courts, the priests no sacrifices, and the builders no stones to haul. And lucky for you, you get to spend a day in their sandals, though you might want to brace yourself for blisters, mosquito bites, and a diet that's about 90% corn. The Maya countryside is a patchwork of milpas fields cleared by slash and burn. You watch as a family takes stone axes to a patch of forest, felling saplings and leaving the larger trunks to dry out under the sun. Weeks later they'll set it ablaze, turning vegetation into ash that enriches the soil. The smoke billows up, the parrots scatter, and what was dense jungle becomes a neat rectangle of blackened ground. It looks destructive, but it's efficient at least for a few years, until the soil loses its nutrients and the family has to clear a new patch. You can't help thinking it's like borrowing money on a high-interest loan, short-term gain, long-term headache. This cycle of planting and moving keeps entire villages on the move, but the crops that spring from the ashes sustain millions. Maize grows tall, the ears fat and golden. Beans twine up the stalks like green ropes, while squash spreads across the ground, its broad leaves shading the soil. Together they make what's called the Three Sisters, a trio that balances nutrition and keeps the soil reasonably healthy. You crouch down, scoop some earth in your hands, and feel how crumbly and light it is, rich with life, but also fragile. The farmer's day begins before the sun even peeks over the canopy. A pot of atulli, a hot maize drink, warms the belly before the family heads out. Men carry digging sticks, tipped with fire-hardened points, while women and children tote baskets for the harvest. There are no oxen or plows here, no beasts of burden except for human shoulders. Every furrow, every seed planted, every cob harvested is powered by sweat and endurance. You follow a farmer as he jabs the stick into the soil, drops in a few kernels of maize, a bean or two, and pats it closed with his heel. It's repetitive, almost meditative, if you ignore the mosquitoes buzzing like tiny chainsaws in your ears. Within weeks, shoots poke through the ground and soon the field is a jungle of its own, this one entirely edible. But farming isn't just about planting. Water is life, and rain doesn't always fall when or where it's needed. You watch as villagers dig shallow reservoirs and line them with plaster to catch runoff during the rainy season. Some communities build terraces on hillsides, keeping the soil from washing away. Others carve canals that redirect streams. For every king's pyramid in the city center, there are countless unseen engineering projects out here in the mud, built not for glory but for survival. The work is grueling, but it's not without joy. At midday, the family gathers under a makeshift shelter, passing around tamales wrapped in maize husks, flavored with chilies that burn your tongue and make you cough. Cue the joke where someone hands you a jug of cacao to cool off. The children chase each other among the stalks, their laughter mixing with the rustle of leaves and the wind. You realize this is where Maya civilization truly breathes, not in the carved glyphs of kings, but in the rhythm of planting, harvesting, and sharing food. Of course, farming is risky business. Too much rain and the fields flood, too little and the maize shrivels. Pests and disease can wipe out an entire season's work. And unlike you, the Maya farmer doesn't have a fridge stocked with leftovers or a corner store selling instant noodles. If the harvest fails, hunger is immediate, real, and unforgiving. Still, the system is astonishingly productive. By the 8th century, the lowlands are home to perhaps 10 to 15 million people, crowds that rival or exceed populations in Europe at the time. Every one of those mouths is fed by this relentless cycle of slash, burn, plant and move on. You might even say the Maya invented the original pop-up farm, except there's no Instagram bragging rights, just survival. You notice too, the diversity of crops. While maize is king, cacao pods hang from trees like golden lanterns, their seeds roasted into the bitter, frothy chocolate drink beloved by nobles. Cotton grows for weaving cloth, chili peppers, avocados, papayas and pineapples round out the menu, while dogs and turkeys provide occasional protein. And if you're unlucky enough to be a captured enemy warrior, well, let's just say your role in the diet might be more ceremonial. Don't worry though. The jokes about cannibalism are mostly exaggerations. Mostly, the farmers' homes are humble compared to the stone palaces you left behind. Wattle and daub walls, thatched roofs, dirt floors. A clay hearth in the corner smoulders with coals, where tortillas puff up on flat griddle. Outside, a metate stone sits ready for grinding maize, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone echoing through the village. It's a sound you'll hear 1,000 times a day, the heartbeat of Maya life. Religion, too, seeps into the fields. Before planting, farmers offer prayers and incense to the maize god, asking for rain and protection. Little shrines dot the countryside, stacked with offerings of flowers, food, and sometimes a drop of blood from a finger prick. It's a reminder that in the Maya world, farming isn't just an economic activity. It's sacred, tied to cosmic cycles and divine favor. And speaking of cycles, the Maya calendar shapes even agricultural life. The 260-day sacred calendar and the 3065-day solar calendar intertwine, marking auspicious days to plant and harvest. Imagine scheduling your garden work, not by weather apps, but by a system so precise that it can predict lunar eclipses. If you plant on the wrong day, you risk more than poor yields. You risk cosmic imbalance. No pressure. As the day winds down, you walk back toward the city alongside the farmers, baskets now heavy with maize. The sun sets in a blaze of orange, cicadas start their chorus, and smoke rises from cooking fires in every household. The city looms ahead, its temples glowing in the twilight. But you can't shake the thought that its glory depends entirely on these weary men and women trudging home beside you. And here's the kicker. The very farming practices that sustain the Maya also lay the seeds of collapse. Slash and burn works wonders at first, but it demands constant new land. As populations boom, the forest shrinks, soils tire, and the pressure mounts. You're standing in a system that feels eternal, but already its foundations are strained. Still, for now, life continues. Tonight, tortillas will be shared, stories told, children lulled to sleep under thatched roofs. Tomorrow, the fields will call again, and the rhythm will repeat. And as you drift off in your borrowed hammock, belly full of maize and beans, you realize that while kings and priests may write the headlines of Maya history, it's these farmers who keep the civilization alive at least until the rains stop coming and the soil runs dry. Better hope that doesn't happen anytime soon. You've had your fill of maize fields and mosquito bites, so you head back into the heart of the city, where things get a lot more glamorous and a lot more dangerous. Forget the muddy sandals of the farmers. Now you're stepping into polished limestone courtyards, shaded porticos, and halls echoing with the whispers of nobles plotting their next move. This is the royal court of the Maya, and it's a world where a single decision by the king can mean feast or famine, peace or war, survival or, you guessed it, your head on someone else's altar. The first thing you notice is the hierarchy. The Maya world is not some egalitarian commune. It's a rigid pyramid of power, and you're definitely not anywhere near the top. At the apex sits the Ager, the king. His title literally means Lord or He of Holy Power, and trust me, he takes that job description very seriously. Draped in jaguar pelts, his ears weighed down with jade plugs, and a headdress of quetzal feathers, so long it could double as a peacock parade. He isn't just a political leader, he's the living embodiment of divine order. When he speaks, the gods are believed to speak through him. Around him orbit the nobility, each with their own lands, servants, and ambitions. Scribes record every ritual and victory on bark paper codices, or in stone inscriptions. Priests oversee ceremonies, reading omens from the movement of stars or the way a drop of blood falls on parchment. Military captains brag about how many enemy kings they've captured, while artisans carve monuments glorifying the dynasty's greatness. And somewhere in the mix are the courtiers whispering behind sleeves, scheming for influence like it's the world's first corporate office drama. You get your first taste of royal life during a court assembly. The king sits cross-legged on a dais, his back straight despite the heavy regalia. Courtiers file in, bowing low, careful not to make eye contact unless summoned. A messenger kneels, unrolling a bundle of cloth filled with tribute from a vassal city. Cacao beans, obsidian blades, woven cloth, and maybe even a few exotic parrots whose feathers shimmer in the dim light. Everyone watches the king's expression. Will he nod approval or scowl at the offering? A single grimace could spell trouble for that vassal's future. Politics here are not about polite debates and handshakes. They're about power, prestige, and, more often than not, blood. Rival city-states like Tikal and Calakmul wage wars that drag on for generations. Alliances shifting like sand underfoot. A marriage between noble houses might secure peace for a decade, only to collapse in betrayal when one side sees an opportunity. You can practically feel the tension in the air, like standing in a room full of lit firecrackers. Take the rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul, for example. These two superpowers are like heavyweight boxers circling each other in a ring, trading blows while smaller cities watch nervously from the sidelines. Calakmul might form an alliance with Karakol, and suddenly Tikal is scrambling to pull in Palenque as backup. Armies march through the jungle, obsidian-tipped spears gleaming, while spies sneak through enemy plazas disguised as merchants. And when a city falls, its king doesn't just lose his throne. He might be paraded through the victor's streets, bound and humiliated, before ending up as a very special guest at a sacrificial ceremony. You'd probably want to skip that after-party. Of course, all this warfare isn't just random violence. It's tightly bound to the Maya idea of cosmic balance. Capturing enemy nobles isn't just politically useful. It's spiritually necessary, a bloodletting ritual with a commoner's blood. Nice effort, but not really impressive. A bloodletting ritual with the blood of a rival king. Now that's worthy of the gods' attention. You can imagine the royal propaganda machine at work. Our Ajar captured the enemy lord and fed him to the gods, ensuring rain for our crops and victory for our people. It's like combining a political campaign ad with a divine weather forecast. But don't think it's all blood and doom. Royal courts are also centers of art, learning, and diplomacy. Scribes develop beautifully intricate glyphs, filling codices with history, astronomy, and myths. Musicians perform with drums, rattles, and flutes carved from deer bone, filling the halls with rhythms that echo like jungle heartbeats. Dancers in elaborate costumes mimic gods and animals, turning ceremonies into full-on theatrical productions. You're basically watching Broadway, Maya edition, except instead of jazz hands, you get bloodletting and incense smoke. The court is also a place of wealth on a scale that makes your head spin. Jade, obsidian, shells from distant coasts, cacao for frothy chocolate drinks. It's all here, flaunted by nobles as proof of status. You sip a bitter cup of chocolate, thickened with maize and spiced with chili, and instantly regret it. It tastes nothing like the candy bars you know, more like spicy mud. Still, you keep sipping, because in this world, refusing would be a major faux pas, and honestly, after a few gulps, it kind of grows on you. Or maybe you've just lost feeling in your tongue from the chili burn. Now, let's talk dynasties. The Maya are obsessed with lineage. Every king traces his ancestry back, not just to human ancestors, but to gods and mythical heroes. Genealogies are carved in stone, making sure everyone remembers who has the right to rule. The king's legitimacy rests on his bloodline, and marriages are carefully arranged to strengthen ties between ruling families. Forget romance. This is politics with a side of offspring production. And when a new king takes the throne, the whole city holds its breath. A coronation ceremony can involve days of rituals, processions, feasts, and yes, plenty of bloodletting. The new ruler might pierce his tongue with a stingray spine, letting the blood drip onto bark paper, which is then burned so the smoke carries his sacrifice to the gods. You wince just imagining it, but the crowd cheers, convinced the cosmic order has been restored. The downside of all this dynastic obsession is instability. When kings die without heirs, or when rival factions challenge the throne, civil wars erupt. You might think of the Maya collapse as a single dramatic event, but standing here in the court, you realize it's more like a series of cracks spreading through the political system. Each succession crisis weakens a dynasty, each failed alliance saps resources, and each lost battle chips away at the illusion of divine power. Meanwhile, commoners look on from the sidelines. For them, the court's drama might feel distant, but the consequences aren't. Tribute demands can skyrocket after a costly war. Farmers might be forced to give up more maize to feed the king's armies. Craftsmen might be drafted into building new monuments to celebrate victories or to distract from defeats. The glory of the court always comes at a price, and guess who pays it? Spoiler, not the guys in jade necklaces. But let's not get too cynical. The royal court is also a hub of knowledge that benefits the whole civilization. Astronomers track the movements of Venus, using it to plan wars and rituals. Mathematicians refine their base 20 number system, complete with the revolutionary concept of zero, a concept Europe won't really embrace for centuries. Architects design temples and palaces that still stand 1,000 years later, aligned with celestial events. Standing in the court, you realize you're at the nerve center of one of humanity's most brilliant cultures. And yet, you can't shake the sense of fragility. So much depends on the charisma of a single ruler, the outcome of a single battle, the fertility of a single royal marriage. You picture the king, proud and resplendent in his feathered headdress, and wonder, what happens when the rains fail, when the crops wither, when the people stop believing he can intercede with the gods? For now, though, the court thrives, a theater of power and faith, where every gesture and every drop of blood reinforces the story of Maya greatness. As you slip out of the palace and back into the plaza, the night air feels heavy. Behind you, the court continues its endless dance of politics and ceremony. Ahead of you, the temples glow in moonlight, their staircases steep and foreboding. You can't help but feel you're climbing those steps yourself, pulled deeper into a world where kings and gods share the same stage, and where the cracks in that stage are just beginning to show. You've seen the farmers with dirt under their nails, and the kings with jade dripping from their ears, but you still haven't grasped what ties this whole civilization together. That glue, that invisible force running through every field, plaza, and palace, is religion. To the Maya, the world is not just earth underfoot and sky overhead. It's a layered cosmos, stitched together with gods, ancestors, and forces that demand constant attention. And guess what? You've just been invited into one of their rituals. Spoiler, it involves blood, fire, and maybe a vision or two that will make your head spin. The Maya cosmos is a 3-story house. Down in the basement lies Ibalba, the underworld, filled with death gods and trickster spirits. It's not exactly a cozy place. You wouldn't want to book an Airbnb there. Above that sits the middle world, the realm of humans, where you're currently standing, sweating through your cotton tunic, and high above is the celestial realm, home to gods of maize, rain, sun, and Venus. These 3 levels are connected by a great world tree, the Seba. Its roots dig into Xibalba, its trunk rises through the human world, and its branches stretch into the heavens. Now you might be thinking, cool mythology lesson, but what does that have to do with daily life? Everything. To the Maya, every harvest, every battle, every birth is tied to this cosmic structure. And who keeps the whole system running? The kings and queens, who act as shamans, linking the human world to the divine. Which brings you back to that ritual you've stumbled into. The plaza is packed, the smell of copal incense sharp in your nose. Priests in jaguar skins circle the steps of the temple, chanting in low, rhythmic tones. Drums pound like a second heartbeat in your chest. And there at the top of the pyramid, the king kneels with a stingray spine in hand. No, he's not about to go fishing, he's about to pierce his tongue, dragging a thorny rope through the wound, letting his blood drip onto strips of bark paper. You flinch just watching, your own tongue curling back in protest. But to the Maya, this is the ultimate act of devotion, feeding the gods with your own life force. The bark paper is collected, smeared crimson, and placed in a ceramic bowl. A torch sets it ablaze, and smoke curls into the night air. Everyone watches, holding their breath. The king stares into the smoke, waiting. Soon his eyes glaze, his body sways, and he murmurs. He claims to see vision serpents, uncoiling from the smoke, their jaws opening to reveal ancestors or gods who deliver messages. You lean in, half convinced it's real, half suspecting this is the world's earliest psychedelic trip. Either way, the crowd gasps in awe. The king has spoken with the divine. Balance is restored for now. Bloodletting isn't just for kings. Nobles, priests, even ordinary people participate, though maybe with smaller stakes. Piercing an earlobe or letting a drop fall from a finger prick. Blood is sacred because it carries life force, and offering it to the gods is like paying rent on the cosmic apartment you live in. Forget late fees, the gods demand prompt, regular payments. Sacrifices don't stop at bloodletting. There are animal offerings, turkeys, dogs, and deer. And yes, there are human sacrifices, though not as common as Hollywood loves to suggest. Captured warriors, especially nobles from enemy cities, are prime candidates. A public beheading on a temple platform, that's not just violence. It's political theater and cosmic duty rolled into one. You hear the crowd roar as the victim's blood stains the stone, ensuring the maize will grow, the rains will fall, and the sun will rise again tomorrow. It's brutal, yes, but to the Maya, it's necessary. And speaking of maize, you can't overstate its sacredness. The Maya creation story tells of humans being shaped from maize dough, kneaded by the gods. You're literally looking at a civilization that believes they are the people of maize. Every tortilla, every tamale, every sip of atole is more than food. It's communion with their origins. You take a bite of a steaming tortilla, and suddenly it feels like you're eating history itself. Also, it's delicious, so that helps. The gods themselves are as complex as the society that worships them. Shark, the rain god, is depicted with a long snout and curling fangs. You see his image carved on temples, his eyes bulging like a frog's. Farmers pray to him with offerings, desperate for the rains that keep maize alive. Then there's Itzamna, the sky god, often shown as an old man with a hooked nose, wise and grandfatherly. Ixchel, the moon goddess, governs fertility, childbirth, and weaving. And let's not forget Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, whose image will later blend with Toltec influences at Chichi. Each god has multiple aspects, shifting faces, and overlapping roles. It's like divine multitasking on steroids. Astronomy and religion are inseparable. Priests track the cycles of Venus, believing its appearances and disappearances dictate the timing of wars. They follow the solstices and equinoxes, aligning temples so that shadows form serpents slithering down the staircases. You stand in awe at Chichen Itza, centuries later, watching as the equinox sun casts a serpent's body across the pyramid of Kukulkan, a spectacle so precise it's basically a cosmic light show. The message is clear. The gods are present, watching, demanding attention. And then there are the ball courts. At first glance they look like sports arenas, with sloping stone walls and rings mounted high. But the Maya ball game isn't just entertainment, it's ritual drama. Teams of players hurl a solid rubber ball with hips, elbows and knees, aiming to pass it through the stone ring. The game symbolizes the eternal struggle between day and night, life and death, gods and mortals. And sometimes the stakes are lethal: losers or winners, depending on the myth and occasion, might face sacrifice. Next time you complain about losing a pickup game, remember at least you get to walk away with your head. You can't help but marvel at how deeply this religion penetrates daily life. A farmer planting maize whispers prayers to Chak. A midwife invokes Ixchel during childbirth. A king bleeds on paper to keep the cosmos in balance. Time itself is sacred, measured in cycles that intertwine like gears. Every date has meaning, every action echoes in the spiritual realm. But this all-encompassing religion has a dark side. When drought strikes or war goes badly, people don't blame poor luck or bad leadership alone. They wonder if the gods are angry, if sacrifices haven't been enough, if cosmic order is unraveling, and when rulers can no longer convince their people that the blood on the altar is buying rain from the sky, faith begins to fray. You're watching the seeds of collapse sprout right here in the incense smoke. Still, in this moment, the system holds. The crowd chants as the king raises his blood-stained hands to the sky, the smoke of his offering curling upward like a bridge to the heavens. You stand shoulder to shoulder with the faithful, your ears ringing with drums, your eyes watering from incense, your stomach queasy at the sight of blood, but your heart pounding with awe. Because for the Maya this isn't superstition, this is reality. The gods are real, the balance fragile, and your very survival depends on keeping them satisfied. So as the ritual ends and the crowd disperses, you stumble away, light-headed, overwhelmed, and maybe just a little relieved you weren't picked as tonight's special offering. But you also feel the gravity of what you've witnessed, a civilization bound not just by power or maze, but by a vision of the universe where every heartbeat, every drop of blood, every rising sun, is part of a sacred contract with forces far greater than yourself. You've watched kings bleed for the gods and farmers sweat for their maize. But here's the thing, none of it works without clever engineering. The Maya lived in one of the trickiest environments imaginable. Dense jungle, thin soils, unpredictable rainfall, and no big rivers like the Nile or the Tigris to give them a free irrigation system. If you think your backyard garden gets complicated when the sprinkler breaks, imagine trying to feed millions in a rainforest where the rain comes in wild bursts and then disappears for months. And yet, the Maya didn't just survive here. They thrived thanks to ingenious water management and land engineering that would make even modern urban planners nod in respect. Take a walk to the edge of the city of Tikal, and you'll see what I mean. The limestone bedrock around here doesn't hold water very well, so streams and rivers are rare. To fix that, the Maya dug massive reservoirs right in the heart of their cities. Imagine giant stone-lined swimming pools, some holding millions of liters of water, fed by carefully channeled runoff from plazas, roofs and causeways. You're standing on what looks like an ordinary plaza floor, but the limestone paving is angled just slightly, so that rainwater trickles down toward drains, leading to reservoirs. Even the fancy stucco coatings weren't just for looks, they helped seal the catchment. That's ancient civil engineering disguised as ritual space. When the rains came, these reservoirs filled like bathtubs. When the dry season dragged on, people hauled water in clay jars back to their households, often making dozens of trips a day. You try lifting a 20-liter jar on your shoulder, and suddenly your CrossFit workout feels like child's play. For the Maya, it was daily survival. But reservoirs were only part of the picture. Out in the countryside, farmers built terraces on hillsides, stacking stone retaining walls to create flat surfaces where soil wouldn't wash away. These terraces trapped rain, slowed erosion, and made marginal land productive. Walk through the hills around Kapan or Karakol, and you'll find these terraced landscapes carved into slopes like giant green staircases. They're so durable that some are still visible 1,000 years later, a testament to sheer persistence. In the swampy Bajors, those low marshy areas that flood in rainy season and bake in drought, the Maya developed raised field agriculture. They piled up soil into platforms above the floodline, dug canals alongside them, and used the muck scooped out of canals to refresh the fields with nutrients. If you're thinking that sounds a lot like Aztec chinampas in Mexico City, you're right, though the Maya had their own twist. Standing there, you can picture rows of green fields floating above the water, farmers maneuvering canoes through the canals, and maize tassels swaying in the breeze. Not bad for a swamp. And then there's the miracle of Maya roads, Sakbilub, or white roads. These raised causeways plastered with white lime connected temples within a city, and sometimes stretched miles into the countryside. They weren't just for traffic, they also helped direct water, channeling runoff during storms. At night, the plaster gleamed in moonlight, so you could literally follow the shining path through the jungle. Imagine Google Maps, but glowing under the stars. Engineering wasn't limited to water and farms. The Maya had a knack for urban design that made their cities resilient. At Palenque, aqueducts channeled mountain streams right through the city center, providing clean water and reducing flood risks. At Uxmal, cisterns dug into bedrock stored precious rainwater in the arid north. At Kupan, retaining walls stabilized riverbanks to protect the city from erosion. Everywhere you go, you see signs that the Maya refused to let nature push them around. They bent it to their will with ingenuity and persistence. But here's the twist. All this brilliance wasn't evenly distributed. Some cities had water to spare, while others lived one bad dry season away from crisis. You walk through a bustling market and hear gossip. Caracol's reservoirs are nearly empty. Tikal's terraces can't keep up with the population. Calakmul just cut down another patch of forest for fields. You realize engineering bought them time, but it didn't solve the deeper problem: too many people, not enough reliable resources. Still, it's impossible not to admire the scale of these projects. Picture the labor required. Thousands of commoners hauling stones, plastering surfaces with lime made from burning tons of limestone, digging canals under the burning sun, and they weren't paid in gold or wages. Their payment was protection from the gods, the promise of cosmic balance, and maybe a cup of frothy chocolate on a festival day. You mutter something about ancient unpaid internships, but the farmer next to you just laughs. This was duty, not choice. Let's not forget, the Maya also engineered knowledge. Their astronomical observations weren't just abstract. They tied directly into agriculture and water management. Priests tracked the Pleiades, Venus, and the solar year, predicting rainy seasons and planning planting cycles. They used the 3065-day hub calendar to schedule farming, while the 2060-day Tzolk'in guided ritual events. Every reservoir, every terrace, every raised field wasn't just physical engineering. It was part of a larger cosmic design, aligned with calendars that blended science and spirituality. Walk a little farther into the forest, and you see scars of deforestation. Limestone kilns devour wood by the ton to produce lime plaster for cities. Fields eat up jungle, pushing the edge of cultivation ever outward. Villages clear trees for firewood, hunting grounds, and new farmland. The engineering that sustains millions also accelerates environmental strain. You can almost hear the earth groaning under the weight of demand. And yet, for now, the system works. In the 8th century, Maya cities are booming. Populations swell, monuments rise taller, reservoirs brim with water after rainy seasons. Farmers trade surplus maize in bustling markets. Children splash in aqueducts. Priests stand on terraces, offering thanks to Chak for the gift of rain. The resilience feels unshakable. You sit on the edge of a reservoir at sunset, feet dangling in the cool water. The surface reflects the temple skyline, shimmering orange and gold. A woman nearby fills her jar, balancing it effortlessly on her head as she walks away. A child tosses a stick into the water, watching ripples spread. It's a moment of calm, of beauty, of a system working as designed. But you've got that nagging thought again. You know the droughts are coming. You know the soil will grow tired. You know the forests won't last forever. These reservoirs, terraces, and canals are brilliant. Yes, but they're patches on a system stretched to its limits. One bad season, one shift in rainfall patterns, and all this engineering might not be enough. For now, though, the water sparkles, the maize grows tall, and the people believe their gods are satisfied. You take a sip from a gourd of fresh water, cool against your parched throat, and let yourself believe it too, if only for tonight. You've walked through the fields, sat in the royal courts, breathed in incense during bloodletting rituals, and balanced jars of water on your sore shoulders. By now you probably think you've seen the Maya at their most impressive, but hold on. The best, or worst, depending on your taste for cosmic irony, is still ahead, because right now, in the late 700s and early 800s CE, the Maya are peaking. Bigger cities, bigger monuments, more people crammed into plazas, more corn cobs on the griddles. On the surface, everything looks unstoppable, like the civilization is on a permanent winning streak. But as you know, winning streaks don't last forever. So let's zoom in on the high point before the fall. You start with the monuments. The Maya kings are building stelae, those towering stone slabs carved with glyphs, like there's no tomorrow. Literally, every ruler wants his life story immortalized in stone. The wars he won, the captives he took, the gods he appeased. Walk through Kupan and you'll find Stela 63, dozens of them, lined up like an outdoor library of propaganda. Some reach over 20 feet tall, their surfaces covered in glyphs, so precise you can still read the dates today. They shout, "Look at me, I mattered, I held the cosmos in balance." Then there are the temples. Every new king seems determined to outdo the last, stacking another layer on top of the pyramid, raising staircases that make your knees scream after 3 steps. At Tikal, the towering Temple 4 reaches nearly 70 meters high, taller than Notre Dame, built centuries earlier. Imagine dragging limestone blocks up steep ramps in the blazing sun, with no wheels, no beasts of burden, and your supervisor yelling, "Hurry up, the gods are waiting." You'd need at least 2 cacao breaks to survive. And it's not just size. The artistry is staggering. Intricate stucco masks, painted in vibrant reds, blues and yellows, glare from temple facades. Murals bloom with scenes of nobles in feathered headdresses, dancers in jaguar skins, warriors carrying obsidian blades that glint like black lightning. The colors don't just decorate, they tell stories, reinforce myths, cement the ruler's divine connection. Imagine Times Square billboards, but instead of fast food ads, you get kings posing with gods, announcing their latest cosmic deal. The cities themselves sprawl. Estimates suggest some places like Tikal may have had tens of thousands of residents in the urban core, with hundreds of thousands in the surrounding countryside. Picture the constant buzz. Markets packed with traders selling salt, cotton, honey, jade, cacao, and obsidian. The smell of chili-spiced chocolate wafts through the stalls. Children chase turkeys between booths. A woman haggles fiercely over the price of dyed cloth, while her husband sneaks off to sample pulque, a fermented drink that tastes like sour lemonade, but packs a punch. You're basically at the ancient version of Costco on Black Friday, minus the shopping carts. Trade networks hum across the landscape. Canoes laden with salt and fish glide along rivers and coastal routes. Obsidian from the highlands flashes in the hands of lowland warriors. Seashells from the Gulf of Mexico show up as jewelry in inland villages, hundreds of miles away. There's even evidence of contact with distant regions, bits of copper from western Mexico, feathers from tropical zones, and cultural hints suggesting influences as far as central Mexico, and maybe even beyond. It's globalization Maya style, and business is booming. Population, art, architecture, trade. It's all rising, rising, rising. You feel it in the air, the kind of electric hum a society gives off when it's convinced it's on the verge of something eternal. People probably looked at the pyramids and thought, these will stand forever. Our kings will always bleed for the gods. The maize will never stop growing. And yet, if you know what's coming, you start noticing the cracks. Take agriculture. Remember those slash and burn fields? They work beautifully at first, but now there are too many mouths to feed, and not enough forest to clear. Farmers push farther out, carve terraces into every available hillside, dig deeper reservoirs. They're wringing every calorie possible out of the land. But soil doesn't bounce back as quickly as demand grows. Already you hear mutters of thinner harvests, fields left barren, people pressed to eat roots and less desirable plants when the maize runs short. Or look at the politics. Every new monument isn't just bragging. It's a ruler desperately trying to prove his power in an increasingly crowded arena. Rivalries grow fiercer. Kings wage wars not just for captives, but for prestige, for the right to carve their victories in stone and remind everyone that the gods still favor them. A monument celebrating triumph isn't always a sign of confidence. Sometimes it's covering insecurity. You might call it the ancient equivalent of a politician tweeting too much. And then there's the human cost. Imagine being a commoner, hauling stone blocks day after day, or grinding maize until your joints ache, or handing over more and more tribute to fund your king's next monument or war. Pride in your city can only carry you so far. When your stomach's empty, whispers of resentment begin to drift through the streets, though no one dares say them too loudly. After all, questioning the king is questioning the gods, and that's not exactly a safe career move. Still, the spectacle is dazzling. You attend a festival in the great plaza at Kupan. The king appears on a raised platform, jade ornaments glittering, feathers flowing like a waterfall of green light. Drummers pound turtle shells, dancers leap and twist, priests scatter incense that makes your eyes water. Then the king announces a victory over a rival city. Captives are paraded before the crowd, bound, their heads lowered. The people cheer, the stelae are already being carved to immortalize the event. And for a moment you can almost believe this civilization will last forever. Almost. Because you catch a glimpse of something else. The weary faces of farmers in the crowd. The gaunt look of children clutching half-eaten tortillas. The way a noble whispers nervously to another when the king proclaims his greatness. The monuments are bigger, yes, but they're also more desperate, as if shouting louder will hold back the storm. It reminds you of a candle flame, burning brightest just before it gutters out. The Maya, at their zenith, are pushing their system to the limit. More people, more temples, more wars, more demands on the land, and the gods. It's glorious, it's terrifying, and it's unsustainable. For now, though, you're swept up in the tide. You eat maize tamales dripping with chili sauce, sip bitter cacao until your lips tingle, and dance awkwardly in the plaza while the drums thunder. You laugh at your own clumsy steps, only to realize the dancers around you aren't just partying, they're reenacting myths, embodying gods, keeping the cosmos spinning with every move. Everything here, food, music, art, politics, farming, is part of a single, intricate machine. And tonight that machine is humming like never before. You tilt your head back, staring at the temple steps glowing in torchlight. From this angle, it looks like the staircase climbs straight into the stars. For a moment, you let yourself believe the hype, that the Maya have mastered the jungle, tamed the rains, secured the gods' favor, and built a civilization too grand to ever crumble. But deep down, you know, every peak is just a step before the fall. And the higher the climb, the harder the collapse. The night festivals fade, the drums quiet down, and the incense smoke clears. For a moment it seems like the Maya can keep building forever. But lean in closer, and you'll hear something else in the plazas. Something sharper than laughter, and more dangerous than the mosquitoes. The clash of spears, the whistle of obsidian-tipped arrows, the cries of captives. Because as the 8th century rolls on, the first cracks begin to split the Maya world wide open, and a lot of those cracks are carved by war. From the outside, the city-states look like siblings in one big, extended family. They share writing, calendars, gods, and architectural styles. But don't mistake similarity for unity. The Maya are not one empire with a single capital. They're dozens of fiercely independent city-states, each ruled by a king who believes the gods personally endorse his right to rule. And when you have a jungle full of rulers all convinced they're chosen by heaven, cooperation isn't usually the first instinct. Rivalries spark, alliances form and break, and sooner or later someone's warriors are marching into someone else's plaza. Tikal and Kalakmal are the poster children of this rivalry. Picture them like two heavyweight fighters, circling the ring for centuries, occasionally landing a punch, sometimes retreating to catch their breath, but never stopping the contest. Each builds coalitions of smaller cities, dragging neighbors into their orbit. A little place like Dos Pilas might suddenly matter a lot, because it sits on a trade route or controls access to fertile land. The kings of these cities spend as much time negotiating alliances and arranging marriages as they do bleeding for the gods. And when those deals sour, blood doesn't just drip on bark paper, it soaks the earth. You wander into Karakul and Belize around 56-2 CE. Yes, a little earlier than our current moment, but the story matters, and hear the locals bragging. They helped Calakmul take down Tikal, capturing its king and humiliating one of the greatest cities of the lowlands. For more than a century afterward, Tikal sulks in the corner, its monuments eerily silent. You can almost imagine its scribes snapping their chisels in frustration. But of course Tikal isn't down for good. By the late 7th century, it comes roaring back, winning decisive victories, dragging captives into plazas, and reasserting itself as a cosmic powerhouse. Think of it as the ultimate Maya comeback tour, complete with bloody opening acts. By the time you arrive in the 8th century, warfare has escalated into something different. It's not just about prestige anymore, it's about survival. Populations are pressing against the limits of farmland. Rulers demand ever greater offerings of tribute. Trade routes become lifelines, and controlling them means keeping your city fed and your temple supplied with jade and cacao. Armies clash not only to capture rival nobles for sacrifice, but to seize resources, to break enemies entirely, to secure dominance in a system that feels more fragile every year. Walk through a battlefield, and you'll see the arsenal. Warriors carry wooden spears tipped with razor-sharp obsidian blades, clubs embedded with jagged shards, atlatls to hurl darts with bone-piercing force. Armor is minimal. Quilted cotton vests hardened with salt, jaguar pelts for intimidation, feathered shields for flair, as much as protection. The fighting is chaotic, brutal, and terrifyingly close. This isn't the clash of steel on steel from medieval Europe. It's obsidian slicing through flesh, the air filled with shouts, drums, and the high-pitched whistles blown to rally troops. But here's the twist. War isn't just destruction. It's theater. Capturing prisoners, especially rival nobles, matters more than slaughtering rank-and-file soldiers. You might win the field, but if you can parade a captured lord through your city, you've proven the gods favor you. The captured noble will likely be sacrificed in a public ceremony, his blood offered to keep the universe in balance. It's horrifying, yes, but also politically brilliant. You've humiliated a rival, fed the gods, and reassured your people that their suffering in the fields and workshops isn't for nothing. Still, as wars grow more frequent, something shifts. Where earlier conflicts left cities bruised but intact, late classic wars often annihilate them. Entire dynasties disappear from the historical record. Cities once buzzing with stelae and construction fall silent. You walk through Dos Pilas after its fall and find it eerily empty. Buildings abandoned, monuments toppled, the jungle already creeping back in. It's as if the city exhaled one last time and then vanished. The ripple effects spread. Every war sucks resources, food to feed soldiers, labor to build fortifications, artisans pulled from their homes to carve monuments, celebrating victories. Every war also destabilizes trade. Merchants risk ambushes on jungle paths. Markets lose access to critical goods. People start hoarding instead of sharing, and the psychological toll is real. Imagine being a farmer whose son is conscripted, your maize field neglected, your granaries lighter each year, while your king struts about bragging on Stellada. At some point, the god's favor starts to feel like an excuse for bad leadership. You pause in a plaza where a brand new monument has just been unveiled. It celebrates a victory, lists captives, glorifies the king. But as you study the glyphs, you notice something odd. The text emphasizes not just the king's triumph, but the chaos of enemies breaking apart, fleeing, burning. The tone is darker, more desperate, less like a proud boast, and more like a frantic reminder. We're still in control. We swear we are. The cracks are widening, and even stone propaganda can't cover them forever. For the people living through it, though, life goes on, at least for a while. Markets reopen after wars. Farmers plant again. Priests assure everyone that the sacrifices have restored cosmic balance. Children play in ball courts, imitating warriors with toy spears. You hear laughter, smell roasting maize, watch dancers leap in jaguar skins. The rhythm of life is resilient even under the shadow of conflict. And yet, the sense of tension builds. You feel it in the wary glances across city borders, the hurried repairs to fortifications, the endless processions of prisoners. You hear it in the way scribes carve more glyphs about war than about anything else. You see it in the monuments that grow bigger and more numerous, as if sheer stone could hold back the unraveling. Standing there, you realize you're watching the pivot point. The Maya are still dazzling, still powerful, still building and bleeding and believing. But the wars that once reinforced their world are beginning to tear it apart. The machine is grinding harder, demanding more fuel, more blood, more resources, and the gears are starting to strip. The cracks are no longer invisible. They're right there in the plazas, in the exhausted faces of farmers, in the silent ruins of cities that once rivaled the greats. The question isn't if collapse is coming, it's how fast and how hard. You've watched the forests shrink and the soils thin, but now the sky itself turns hostile. Imagine depending on rain for everything. Your drinking water, your crops, your reservoirs, your very survival. And then one year, the clouds simply stop showing up. That's what begins to unfold in the Maya world. Mega droughts, stretching years at a time, battering a civilization already stretched thin. At first you notice small changes. The rainy season starts late. Farmers whisper nervously. Reservoirs don't fill quite as high. The people shrug it off. Chak will provide, they say, tossing another offering into the fire, bleeding another drop onto bark paper. But then the next year is no better. Then another, and suddenly, whole regions are gasping for water. Climate scientists today, peering into lake sediments and cave stalagmites, can trace this story in precise lines of chemistry. The isotopes in those deposits whisper of a drying trend, beginning in the late 8th century, punctuated by sharp, punishing droughts that last not months but decades. For the farmers living through it, this isn't data, it's cracked earth where maize once sprouted, dry reservoirs where children once splashed, prayers rising unanswered into scorching skies. You walk through a parched village in the Peten. Once lush fields now crunch under your feet. The plants stunted, leaves curled like withered fists. Women line up at a reservoir that's little more than a muddy puddle, scraping the last drops into jars. Children cry with thirst, their lips cracked. Elders shake their heads and mutter, "The gods are angry." The air smells of dust, not rain. Even cities built with brilliant water systems feel the strain. Reservoirs silt up or dry completely. Canals stand empty. The plastered plazas that once channeled rain now sit useless under a cloudless sky. At Tikal, desperate workers dig deeper and deeper into old reservoirs, hoping to hit water that isn't there. At Kopan, people abandon homes near dry streams, clustering closer to the main plaza in the hope that the rulers can summon rain. But rulers, no matter how many stingray spines they drag across their tongues, can't conjure storms. The rituals grow more frantic. You attend a ceremony where priests pierce their ears, tongues, even genitals, offering rivers of blood to Chak. Nobles fast until they faint. Smoke fills the plazas. Drums pound endlessly. A whisper spreads that if the people only sacrifice more, offer more blood, more captives, maybe even more children, the rains will return. The desperation is palpable. You can't decide which is more terrifying, the drought itself, or the way belief drives people to bleed themselves dry in hopes of clouds that never form. Markets shrink, where once cacao, salt, jade, and obsidian piled high, now the stalls stand half empty. Food prices soar. A basket of maize that once bought a cloak, now barely buys a handful of beans. You hear the muttering, "What good are the gods if they don't give rain? What good are kings if their blood no longer brings balance?" The murmurs are dangerous, but no one dares shout them in the plazas yet. And then, migration begins. Families pack up, leaving behind exhausted fields and dry wells, carrying only what they can on their backs. They head north, where rainfall is a little more reliable, toward the Yucatan. Some arrive in bustling cities like Chichen Itza, swelling their populations. Others vanish into the jungle, leaving behind villages that the forest swallows within years. You walk through one of these abandoned hamlets, collapsed huts, a few broken pots, a grinding stone left behind in haste. It's as if the people evaporated, leaving only silence. The droughts don't hit everywhere equally. Some regions, blessed with cenotes or underground rivers, endure better. In the north, where cities like Oxmal and Chichen Itza thrive, new power centers rise as the southern lowlands falter. But even here, the droughts leave scars, wells run lower, cisterns don't refill, and the strain of feeding swelling populations grows. Back in the southern heartlands, collapse accelerates. Wars grow fiercer as cities fight over dwindling resources. Armies march not just for prestige, but for control of water sources, fertile valleys, or trade routes that can bring in food. Refugees flood into cities, straining supplies. Disease follows hunger, sweeping through weakened populations. You can almost feel the cycle tightening like a noose. Less rain, less food, more war, more death. And yet, in the middle of this chaos, people cling to hope. A woman you meet in a plaza kneels before a small shrine, laying down her last tortilla as an offering. "Jack will come," she whispers. Her children watch, hollow-eyed, clutching her skirts. Across the plaza, the king ascends a temple, arms outstretched, chanting for rain. The crowd kneels, faces lifted to the sky. For a moment, a breeze stirs, and everyone gasps, convinced it's the first breath of a storm. But the clouds don't gather. The sun burns on. The droughts don't just starve bodies, they starve faith. When the gods seem silent, when kings bleed without results, when prayers echo unanswered, belief begins to crack. And once belief in divine order wavers, the entire Maya system, politics, religion, society wobbles on its foundations. You realize you're standing at the tipping point, watching a civilization unravel not with one dramatic collapse, but with years of dry seasons piling misery upon misery. Still, the Maya are stubborn. They don't give up easily, even in the worst droughts. They find ways to endure, planting hardier crops, digging deeper wells, migrating to wetter lands. Some cities adapt and reinvent themselves, others fade into ruin, their plazas silent, their temples choked with vines. It's not one apocalypse, but many small ones, scattered across the jungle like dying embers. And you, wandering through the dust, hear the echo of every cracked maize cob, every empty jar, every whispered prayer. How much longer can we endure without rain? The wars rage on. Monuments keep rising. And kings still bleed for the gods. But while obsidian blades clash in the plazas, something quieter and more insidious is happening out in the fields, in the forests, and in the thin skin of soil beneath your sandals. This is the part of the story nobody at the time puts on a stela, but you, trudging through the countryside, can see it clearly. The land itself is beginning to wear out. Deforestation, soil exhaustion, and environmental strain creep into the Maya world like termites in a wooden beam. The cities still look strong, but the foundation beneath them is starting to rot. You head back out with the farmers, because as always, that's where the truth hides. At first glance, the fields look the same. Maize rising tall, beans climbing stalks, squash sprawling at your feet. But bend down, scoop up some dirt, and you'll notice it feels lighter, dustier, less rich than before. Centuries of slash and burn have eaten away the nutrients. Fields that once produced bumper harvests now yield less, forcing families to clear more forest to keep up. It's like using a credit card to pay the bills. Fine for a while, but eventually the debt comes due. The forests themselves are vanishing. Walk a few miles from the city, and you'll stumble across stumps and blackened ground where lush jungle once stood. The demand is relentless. Wood for houses, wood for cooking fires, wood to feed the lime kilns that produce the plaster coating every temple and plaza. To cover just one major pyramid in gleaming white stucco, thousands of tons of limestone are quarried and burned, each ton requiring several tons of firewood. Multiply that across dozens of cities and centuries, and you've got deforestation on a jaw-dropping scale. The canopy shrinks, wildlife retreats, and farmers march deeper into fragile soils. You hear the farmers talk about how hunting is harder now. Once, deer and peccary roamed near the village. Turkeys rustled in the underbrush. Monkeys hooted overhead. Now the animals retreat farther away, harder to catch, leaner when you do find the protein, already scarce in a maize-heavy diet, becomes even scarcer. Meals grow simpler, less nourishing, and stomachs feel emptier even when full. Soil erosion. makes the problem worse. Without trees to anchor them, hillsides bleed away in the rainy season, muddying streams and leaving behind bare rock. Terraces can only do so much. In some places, gullies carve deep scars, fields shrink, and villages relocate, abandoning exhausted land. Imagine the frustration. You spend years carving terraces, planting crops, raising children, and then the soil just washes away, leaving you with rocks and memories. The pressure doesn't stop there. With populations booming, farmers are forced to farm every available patch. Marginal land, once ignored, is pressed into service. Wetlands are drained, hillsides terraced, and even thin, rocky soils are coaxed into production. At first, the ingenuity is inspiring, but soon, the returns diminish. Yields fall, effort rises, and hunger hovers just beyond the horizon. You can almost hear the collective groan of millions of backs bent over digging sticks, trying to wrestle just one more harvest out of tired earth. And it's not just food. Wood shortages ripple into daily life. Families walk farther for firewood, carrying heavy bundles home on aching shoulders. Builders scramble for timber to construct roofs and scaffolding. Artisans complain about the lack of good hardwoods for carving. Even kings feel the pinch. How do you stage a grand ceremony with temples half plastered because you couldn't find enough fuel to fire the lime? It's like trying to host a royal wedding when half the cake is missing. Embarrassing, to say the least. Meanwhile, you notice how water suffers too. With forests gone, rain runs off faster, carrying soil with it, instead of seeping gently into the ground. Reservoirs clog with silt, canals fill with mud. Water once captured in abundance now slips away more quickly, leaving jars emptier in the dry season. You remember how proud the engineers were of their reservoirs, and they're still marvels. But even marvels can choke if the ecosystem feeding them breaks down. The tension shows up in everyday conversation. In markets, you overhear people grumbling about higher maize prices. In villages, elders scold young men for cutting too many trees. At feasts, nobles brag about importing wood and food from far-off places, flaunting wealth while commoners gnaw on thin tortillas. You see envy, resentment, worry, all the little emotions that turn cracks into fractures. The kings, of course, don't carve this onto stelae. They still boast about victories, sacrifices, monuments. They still bleed on bark paper to keep the gods happy. But behind the incense and jade, the reality is grimmer. The land that fed their ancestors is weakening, and without land, there's no maize. Without maize, there's no life. Without life, there's no kingdom. You join a family during planting season. They trudge farther than ever, searching for a new patch to clear. Axes swing, branches fall, smoke rises as they burn the brush. They plant, pray, and wait. Weeks later, sprouts appear, but thinner, paler, less vigorous. The family kneels in the field, frowning, whispering to the gods. You stand there watching a fragile green line of maize, and realize you're looking at the future of a collapsing civilization. Still, the Maya are resilient. They adapt as best they can. Raised fields, terraces, reservoirs, brilliant innovations that buy them time. But the equation keeps tilting. More mouths, less forest, more monuments, less firewood, more soil washed away, less maize to grind. It's not a single catastrophe. It's a slow squeeze, a tightening vise of environmental pressure. And here's the dark joke. The very brilliance of the Maya makes the problem worse. Their success allows populations to explode, cities to grow, monuments to multiply. The more they achieve, the more they consume. The more they consume, the more they strain the land. Success plants the seeds of collapse, and by now, those seeds are sprouting everywhere you look. At night, you sit by a hearth in a farmer's hut, listening to the grinding of maize on stone. The family eats in silence, their faces weary. The father finally speaks. The gods demand more. The king demands more. The land gives less. His words hang in the smoky air, heavy as the stones of the pyramids you saw earlier. You lie awake in your hammock, stomach full but heart uneasy, hearing the forest whisper through the night. This cannot last forever. The sky has dried up, the fields are gasping, and the rivers have thinned to a trickle. You'd think things couldn't get much worse. But remember, nature doesn't travel alone. It brings companions. Drought, famine, and hunger open the gates for unrest and disease. And the Maya world begins to reel under a combination of blows that feel less like random misfortune and more like a coordinated ambush. Let's start with famine. In a world where maize is the staff of life, a failed harvest isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. Walk through a village during the dry season, and the desperation is etched into every face. You see clay jars empty of maize kernels, grinding stones gathering dust, children with swollen bellies from malnutrition, women scrape together thin gruels, stretching the last beans into watery broths. A father digs for roots, bitter and barely edible, but something to put in his children's mouths. And always in the background, the whispers. Why aren't the gods listening? Why aren't the kings fixing this? Markets, once vibrant with cacao, salt, cotton, and obsidian, shrink to pitiful displays. A few shriveled squashes, some scrawny turkeys, maybe a pouch of cacao beans hoarded like treasure. Prices skyrocket. A handful of maize costs what once bought a basket. Families barter clothes, tools, even their own labor in exchange for food. Inequality yawns wider than ever. Nobles still manage to stage feasts, flaunting roasted deer and chocolate drinks, while commoners gnaw on scraps. If you're hungry enough, the smell of roasting meat at a noble's banquet feels like a cruel taunt, and hunger always breeds unrest. The kings, once revered as mediators with the gods, now face the full weight of expectation and disappointment. Bloodletting rituals grow longer, sacrifices more frequent. You watch as a ruler staggers down temple steps, pale from loss of blood, insisting that his suffering will bring rain. The crowd cheers, but their eyes are doubtful. Each time the rain fails to arrive, their cheers weaken, their doubts grow louder. You overhear muttered curses in the marketplace, grumbles that the rulers are hoarding food, that they bleed but only for show, that maybe the gods have turned their faces away. Rebellions start small. A village refuses to send its tribute. A group of farmers arms themselves with digging sticks and obsidian knives, ambushing tax collectors. A minor noble, tired of watching his people starve while his overlord builds another temple, declares independence. The jungle becomes a patchwork of revolt. Armies are dispatched to crush uprisings, but each campaign drains more food, more labor, more trust. It's a vicious cycle. Rebellion rises because of hunger, suppression deepens hunger, which sparks more rebellion. Disease, of course, lurks in the background. Malnourished bodies are easy prey for infections. Children die from fevers, elders from stomach ailments, entire households from epidemics that sweep through cramped, unsanitary cities. Imagine living in a place where clean water is scarce, food is scarce, and people are packed tightly together, exactly the conditions where diseases flourish. Archaeologists can't name every illness the Maya endured, but you can bet dysentery, parasites, and mosquito-borne fevers were constant companions. And when people are already weakened by hunger, the death toll climbs. The psychological toll is just as heavy. Once, the ball courts echoed with laughter and cheers. Now games are fewer, the energy subdued. Once, dancers in jaguar skins leapt through plazas. Now their costumes look threadbare, their movements weary. Even the temples feel different. The incense still burns, the chants still rise, but there's a hollow edge, like everyone knows the performance isn't working anymore. You sit in the plaza during a ritual, and feel it in your bones. The faith is fraying. You hear rumors of desperate measures. Some communities turn to darker rituals, offering more captives, more blood, even whispers of child sacrifice. Priests insist that only the most precious offerings can coax the gods to release the rains. You watch a ceremony where dozens of captives are lined up, their blood spilled in rivers down the temple steps. The crowd roars, the smoke thickens, the chants reach a fever pitch, and then, nothing. The sky stays blue, pitiless. The silence afterward is heavier than the ritual itself. Not all responses are violent or extreme. Some families simply leave. Migration grows, villages empty, cities shrink. People slip away into the forest, hoping to find wetter lands, richer soil, kinder gods. You follow one such group, parents carrying children, elders leaning on sticks, bundles of tools and pots strapped to backs. They walk until their feet bleed, stopping only when they find a place with a trickle of water, where the soil still yields maize. But survival is fragile, and many never make it. Within cities, class divides grow sharper. Nobles retreat behind palace walls, hoarding what stores they can, demanding more tribute to sustain their lifestyles. Commoners grumble louder, their resentment simmering. You picture a banquet hall, filled with nobles sipping frothy chocolate, while outside the gates, hungry farmers glare with hollow eyes. That kind of inequality doesn't stay quiet forever. And yet, amidst all this collapse, there are flashes of resilience. Communities band together, pooling resources, sharing what little they have. Farmers experiment with new crops, adding root vegetables or drought-resistant plants. Families rediscover old traditions of cooperation, rebuilding trust on a smaller, village scale even as cities falter. Collapse doesn't erase human creativity, it just forces it into new shapes. You walk through a once grand city, its temples cracked, its plazas half empty. Vines creep up the staircases, howler monkeys roar from abandoned palaces. But here and there you see life, a family cooking over a hearth, children playing, farmers carrying baskets of whatever they've managed to grow. The city is dying, but the people endure. What you realize is this: famine, unrest and disease don't break the Maya world all at once. They chip away piece by piece, grinding down trust in rulers, draining faith in gods, pushing families into rebellion or migration. The collapse isn't a single thunderclap. It's a slow unraveling, threads snapping one by one, until the great woven fabric of Maya civilization hangs in tatters. And, as you sit in the ruins of a plaza, the air heavy with dust, the sun merciless overhead, you can't help but think of that first night at Tikal, when the torches blazed, the drums thundered, and the king stood tall in his feathered headdress. Back then, it felt eternal. Now it feels like a dream already slipping away. You've trudged through parched fields, sat in plazas filled with hungry murmurs, and watched nobles bleed for gods that no longer send rain. Now comes one of the most haunting sights of all: the abandonment of the great southern cities. These were once the glittering jewels of the Maya world. Tikal, Copan, Palenque, centers of kingship, art and ceremony. And yet, by the 9th century, many of them begin to fall silent, their plazas empty, their temples swallowed by vines. You stand among their stones as the last echoes of life fade, and you realize you are walking through the very process of collapse. Take Copan. At its height, this city in present-day Honduras was renowned for its artistry. The stelae here are among the most finely carved in the Maya world. Their glyphs so delicate it feels like the stone itself wanted to speak. Kings like 18 Rabbit, yes, that's his actual name, commissioned monuments that proclaimed divine power with unmatched beauty. You wander through the ball court, the stone macaw heads still glaring at you centuries later, and imagine the cheers of the crowd when games once decided the fates of captives and the honor of kings. But by the mid-9th century, Copan is in decline. Archaeologists digging into commoner houses find evidence of malnutrition, cramped living conditions, and signs of disease. The last rulers erect smaller, rougher monuments, their workmanship sloppy, their messages desperate. By around 850 CE, the great dynasty sputters out. Within a generation or two, the city is nearly empty. At Tikal, the story is similar. Remember how its temples once towered over plazas buzzing with tens of thousands? By the late 9th century, those plazas grow quiet. Stelae stop being erected after 8069 CE. No more stone boasts of victory. No more record of divine rituals. It's as if the scribes simply packed up their tools and walked away. By the 10th century, the jungle is reclaiming the city. Trees sprout in cracks between temple stones. Howler monkeys replace the roar of crowds, and moss creeps across the carved faces of kings who once thought their power eternal. You climb Temple 4 again, and instead of smoke rising from hearths, you see only endless green. The city has been abandoned, left to the forest. Why the abandonment? You can list the culprits: drought, famine, warfare, rebellion. But walking among the ruins, you feel it's not just one thing, it's exhaustion. The people are tired of pouring blood into temples that yield no rain, tired of hauling tribute to nobles who hoard feasts while children starve, tired of watching kings strut while their villages crumble. When belief collapses, so does obedience, and without obedience, the great machine stops turning. Sometimes the end is violent. You stumble through the ruins of Dos Pilas, a once powerful kingdom that allied with Calakmul. Inscriptions record its bloody conflicts, its rulers constantly at war. Eventually, enemies raze the city. You see burned walls, toppled monuments, signs of hasty defenses. The people don't slowly fade. They flee in panic, leaving their city a smoking carcass in the jungle. Other times, the end is slower, more tragic. At Palenque, the great dynasty of kings ends with Kanbalam II and his successors, whose monuments still glow with artistry. But by the late 8th century, construction slows. By the 9th, it stops entirely. People drift away, leaving behind elegant palaces and temples where bats now flutter in the dark. You walk the corridors of the palace, once alive with nobles and scribes, and hear only the drip of water through cracked ceilings. The silence is deafening. For ordinary people, abandonment isn't some dramatic march out of the city gates. It's families packing quietly, leaving at night, moving to smaller villages, migrating north. One by one, households disappear. A hut roof collapses. A field lies fallow. A grinding stone gathers dust. Multiply that by thousands, and the city empties, not with a bang, but with a whisper. Yet, not everyone leaves. In some abandoned cities, small groups linger, squatters in the shadows of temples, eking out survival in ruins. Archaeologists find signs of humble fires, bones of meals cooked in former palaces, graffiti scratched onto ancient stelae. It's eerie, like families camping in the lobby of a skyscraper, long after the office is shut down. The grandeur fades, but scraps of life cling on. The impact of abandonment ripples outward. Trade networks fracture when cities fall silent. Art traditions fade as workshops close. Knowledge shrinks when scribes no longer copy texts. You run your fingers across a half-finished glyph on a broken monument and feel the weight of lost stories, histories cut short, wisdom never passed on. It's not just cities collapsing, it's memory itself unraveling. But the forest doesn't mourn. Vines wrap around temples, roots split stone, parrots nest where kings once sat. The jungle reclaims everything with shocking speed. Within a few decades, plazas once filled with thousands are buried under green silence. If you stumbled into the Maya lowlands a century after abandonment, you might think no one ever lived here at all, except for the ghostly outlines of pyramids poking above the canopy. Nature erases, as if history is just another harvest to reap. You sit at the top of a crumbling temple, staring across endless jungle. Somewhere out there, families are still planting maize in small clearings, still whispering prayers to Chak, still keeping scraps of tradition alive. But here, in the once great city, only cicadas buzz. You realize, collapse isn't a single moment. It's the steady fading of voices, the slow crumbling of stone, the quiet decision of thousands of families to leave behind the monuments of kings and seek survival elsewhere. And maybe that's the most haunting part. These cities didn't fall because their people forgot how to farm, or stopped believing in gods, or lacked intelligence. They fell because the burden grew too heavy. Too many demands, too many mouths, too many droughts. In the end, people did what humans always do. They moved on. And the jungle, patient and eternal, closed its arms around the stone. You've wandered through the ruins of southern cities, hearing only the hiss of cicadas where once drums pounded and crowds roared. It feels like the story should end there, with the jungle swallowing the heart of the classic Maya. But it does. Collapse in one place becomes transformation in another, and when the southern lowlands falter, the story shifts northward to the Yucatan Peninsula, where new cities rise, new powers form, and Maya civilization reinvents itself. Let's head toward Chichen Itza, one of the most extraordinary cities the Maya ever built. By the late 9th and early 10th centuries, as places like Tikal and Kupang wither, Chichen Itza is booming. You approach across the scrubby plains of northern Yucatan, where rainfall is less generous, but underground rivers, cenotes, provide water year-round. The landscape is different here, drier, flatter, dotted with sinkholes that open into crystalline pools. Where the southern Maya depended on rain-filled reservoirs, the northern Maya anchor their lives around these natural wells. Cenotes become lifelines, both practical and spiritual, gateways to the underworld, and sources of fresh water that never dry out. From a distance the city already dazzles. Rising above the flat plain is El Castillo, the pyramid of Kukulkan. Its step terraces sharp and symmetrical. You squint, shading your eyes, as sunlight glints off its limestone. Compared to the sprawling jungle-wrapped temples of the south, Chichen Itza feels cleaner, sharper, more deliberate. Walk closer and you realize why. It's not just Maya here. The city reflects influences from central Mexico, especially the Toltecs, whose militaristic culture blends with Maya traditions to create something new. Step into the plaza, and the evidence is everywhere. You see carvings of feathered serpents slithering down staircases, warriors carrying atlals and shields, skull racks, sompantly carved with rows of grinning heads. The imagery is more martial, more intimidating than the old southern stelae boasting of lineage. Here, power is declared with visions of sacrifice and conquest on a grand scale. At the same time, the artistry is breathtaking, columns carved with marching warriors, temples covered in intricate reliefs, murals showing trade, battle, and ceremony in vivid color. The ball court at Chichen Itza is the largest in Mesoamerica, nearly 550 feet long. You stand at one end and shout, and the echo bounces back to you like the voice of a god. Imagine the spectacle: players in padded gear, hurling a rubber ball with hips and knees, crowds cheering from the stands, priests watching to interpret the outcome as divine will. And hanging over it all, the possibility of sacrifice for the losers, or winners, depending on the occasion. The message is unmistakable. This is not just a game, it's the cosmos in motion. And Chichen Itza is the stage where gods and humans meet. But Chichen Itza isn't just about intimidation. It's also a hub of trade, drawing goods and ideas from across Mesoamerica. You walk through its markets and see cacao beans from the south, turquoise from the north, copper bells from West Mexico, even objects that hint at contact with cultures as far away as the Caribbean. Canoes glide into ports like Isla Cerritos, bringing salt, fish and obsidian. Merchants haggle in multiple languages, their stalls bursting with cloth, shells, feathers, and jewelry. The city hums with cosmopolitan energy. After the quiet ruins of the southern lowlands, it feels like stepping into a new world. And then there are the cenotes. The sacred cenote of Chichen Itza is more than just a well, it's a portal to the gods. Stand at its edge, peering down into the green water, and you might feel a chill. Over centuries, priests and kings cast offerings here. Jade beads, gold ornaments, carved figures, even human beings. Divers in modern times have retrieved bones from the depths. Proof that sacrifices weren't just symbolic. For the people of Chichen Itza, the cenote was a direct line to Chak, the rain god. In a land where drought could still devastate, it was both hope and terror. Northward shift doesn't mean the old traditions vanish. The kings still perform bloodletting. The gods still demand maize and sacrifice. The calendars still dictate life. But the political order changes. Instead of dynasties ruled by a single Ajah, some scholars believe Chichen Itza operated more like a council, with multiple lords sharing power, an adaptation to new realities after the collapse of southern city-states. Others argue it was dominated by militaristic Toltec-style rulers. Whatever the truth, it's clear the old pattern of divine kingship gave way to new models. The Maya were not static, they adjusted, evolved, experimented. You explore the Temple of the Warriors, where hundreds of columns march in rows like a stone army. The structure blends Maya pyramid design with central Mexican imagery, a testament to cultural fusion. On altars nearby lie shack malls, Stone figures reclining with bowls on their bellies, ready to receive offerings of food, incense or blood. You imagine a ceremony here. Incense thick in the air, warriors standing tall, priests pouring blood into the chakmal's bowl, the crowd chanting for rain. It's both familiar and new, Maya at its core, but reshaped by outside influences. Other northern cities echo the same shift. At Uxmal, you climb the Pyramid of the Magician. Its oval base, unlike anything in the south. At Mayapan, later still, you see walls encircling the city, a rare feature in Maya architecture, perhaps reflecting a world more dangerous, more fragmented. Across the Yucatan the story continues, cities rising, thriving, then eventually falling, but never in lockstep with the old southern collapse. For ordinary people, life goes on in both old and new ways. Farmers still plant maize, beans and squash. Families still grind kernels on metates, still shape tortillas by hand, still whisper prayers to chant. But in the north, they also live in denser towns, closer to cenotes, more tightly tied to trade networks. When drought strikes here, survival is easier thanks to underground water, though hunger still lingers at the edges. Migration brings new faces, new dialects, new tensions, but also resilience. Walking through Chichen Itza, at its peak, you feel both awe and unease. The city is magnificent, its architecture precise, its art vibrant, but the imagery is harsher, the sacrifice is more public, the power more militarized. It feels like a civilization that has learned from collapse, but also carries its scars, reshaped into something tougher, sharper, less forgiving. You can almost hear the unspoken lesson. Survival requires change, and change isn't always gentle. The southern cities may lie silent under vines, but here in the north, the Maya story continues, vibrant and alive. Collapse is not an ending, only a transformation. The people endure, the culture adapts, and the gods still demand their due. You sip a cup of frothy chocolate in the market, watch a caravan unload turquoise, and realize that while the old world has vanished, a new one is thriving right before your eyes. You've seen how the Maya story shifts northward, how Chichen Itza rises from the ashes of the southern collapse, its plazas filled with warriors, merchants and priests. But here's something important. The north doesn't flourish in isolation. The Maya are never sealed off from the rest of Mesoamerica. As their world transforms, new ties stretch outward, context influences, and sometimes outright domination by neighbors beyond the Maya heartlands. To understand the next phase of the story, you've got to follow those threads outward, into a web of exchange and influence that reshapes what it means to be Maya. Let's start with the Toltecs. By the 10th century, central Mexico is dominated by the great city of Tula, capital of the Toltecs. Imagine stone warriors standing sentinel atop temples, carved with butterfly breastplates and atlals. Imagine a culture that blends militarism with artistry, one that radiates influence across Mesoamerica. And now picture that imagery showing up hundreds of miles away, smack in the middle of Chichen Itza. You climb the Temple of the Warriors again, and you can't miss it. Rows of columns carved with warriors in Toltec style, chacmul statues reclining with bowls on their bellies, scenes of skull racks that echo central Mexican Tzompantli. It's not coincidence. How did this happen? Historians debate fiercely. Some argue the Toltecs invaded, conquering Chichen Itza outright, and planting their culture like a flag. Others see it as more of a cultural fusion, Maya elites adopting Toltec imagery and rituals to bolster their own power, maybe even through dynastic marriages or trade ties. Either way, the result is clear. Chichen Itza becomes a hybrid city, Maya at its core, but draped in Toltec styles. Walk through its markets, and you hear multiple languages. Maya dialects blend with Nahuatl, the language of central Mexico. Merchants haggle over turquoise, copper bells, obsidian, cacao, salt, and feather. You taste foods flavored with influences from distant regions, more chilies, more variety, more spice. The city feels cosmopolitan, alive with the hum of exchange, and those exchanges aren't just goods. They're ideas, rituals, gods. Kukulkan, The feathered serpent takes on prominence in the north, echoing Quetzalcoatl of central Mexico. The gods themselves become travelers, crossing cultural borders. The reach of Chichen Itza stretches outward. Coastal ports hum with activity. Isla Cerritos, for instance, becomes a key hub, with warehouses storing goods ferried in by canoe. Picture lines of salt traders unloading baskets, fishermen hauling nets, artisans carving jade and shell ornaments to be shipped inland. The Yucatan becomes a crossroads, linking the Caribbean with inland markets, spreading influence far and wide. But contact isn't always peaceful. You hear stories of raids along coasts, of warriors seizing goods and captives, of rival cities battling for control of trade. Power is increasingly tied, not just to farming maize, but to controlling networks of exchange. A king who commands a port can demand tribute, stage bigger ceremonies, attract more followers. A city that loses access to trade can wither, no matter how grand its temples once were. You notice the imagery shift in art and architecture. Earlier Maya monuments celebrated kingship, lineage, cosmic order. Now, murals and carvings at Chichen Itza show scenes of conquest, rows of warriors, lines of captives. On the walls of the Temple of the Jaguars, you see painted battles, armies clashing, nobles bound, blood flowing. It's propaganda, yes, but also a reflection of changing priorities. The North is more militarized, more outward-looking, more tied to power expressed through dominance than through cosmic lineage alone. Still, not all outside influence is violent. Look closer at household life, and you see subtle changes, copper bells from western Mexico tinkling in ceremonies, new weaving techniques borrowed from traders, pottery styles blending distant motifs. Even the way people measure wealth shifts. Cacao beans remain currency, but turquoise, copper and cotton become equally prized. Farmers still grow maize, but merchants now rival warriors in importance. If you've got the right goods, you can wield as much influence as a spear. The Maya aren't passive in this exchange. They export too. Their cacao, salt, cotton textiles, and carved jade travel far, prized in distant lands. Their scribes and astronomers influence others. Their gods gain new names and faces across Mesoamerica. It's not just Toltecs reshaping Maya culture. It's a two-way street, a constant give and take that keeps the civilization dynamic. But of course, with exchange comes vulnerability. When networks falter, cities dependent on them suffer. A drought that disrupts cacao harvests in the south can ripple north, emptying markets. A war that cuts off a coastal route can starve inland cities of salt and fish. Dependence on trade creates prosperity, but also fragility. You can almost see the cracks forming again. Prosperity tied to long, fragile lines of exchange, just waiting to snap. Still, for now, the North thrives. Chichen Itza grows into one of the largest cities in Mesoamerica, its influence radiating outward. Pilgrims come to see the equinox serpent shadow slide down El Castillo. Merchants fill its plazas with goods from hundreds of miles away. Priests cast offerings into the sacred cenote, filling its depths with jade, gold, and human bones. For a time, it feels eternal, just as Tikal once did. But if you've been paying attention, you know the pattern. Every Maya peak is followed by strain. By the 12th century, Chichen Itza begins to decline. The reasons are murky: civil war, shifting trade routes, rebellion, environmental stress. Power shifts to Miayapan, another northern city, which rises as the next capital of the Yucatan. The cycle continues: rise, flourish, fracture, fall. What you realize, standing here, is that collapse isn't a one-time event. It's waves. The southern lowlands fall silent. The north rises. The north falters. Another center takes its place. Outside influences flow in, reshaping, but never erasing. The Maya are not gone. They are adapting, evolving, absorbing, and transforming. And through it all, the people endure, planting maize, trading goods, whispering prayers, watching the stars. As you walk out of Chichen Itza's plaza, past the serpent heads carved at the base of El Castillo, you glance back. The pyramid gleams in the sun, its steps sharp, its shadow long. It looks eternal. But you've learned by now, eternity in the Maya world is always temporary, always shifting. Tomorrow, another city will rise, another will fall, and the story will keep weaving, thread by thread. You've walked the plazas of Chichen Itza and watched Toltec warriors carved in stone. You've seen the sacred cenote glimmer with offerings, both precious and terrible. But here's the part too many people forget. Even after the collapse of the classic Maya cities, the Maya world did not simply vanish. Millions of people carried on living, farming, trading, building, and worshipping. The so-called post-classic period is vibrant, complicated, and deeply human. The cities may look different, the politics may shift, but the Maya are still here, still thriving in ways their ancestors might not even have imagined. Step into the 12th and 13th centuries, and you'll see what I mean. After Chichen Itza begins to fade, power in the north shifts again, this time to Mayapan. Imagine a city encircled by a stone wall nearly 9 kilometers around, unusual for the Maya, who rarely walled their cities. Inside, the layout feels familiar. Pyramids, temples, ball courts, palaces, but the atmosphere is different. Mayapan isn't just a sacred space, it's a fortress, a reminder that times are less stable, more dangerous. You run your hand along the wall, rough limestone under your fingers, and think this is a civilization that's adapting to constant tension. Inside the walls, Mayapan hums with life. Markets bustle with traders hawking salt, cotton, honey, cacao and obsidian. Farmers arrive with baskets of maize and beans, their backs stooped from the long walk. Artisans shape copper bells, weave cotton into fine cloth, carve shells into jewelry. Scribes still record dates and rituals, though on bark paper codices instead of massive stelae. Priests still watch the skies, charting Venus, scheduling ceremonies. Life is smaller in scale than the grandeur of Tikal, but it is no less rich. And here's the striking part. The population of Mayapan is thought to have been around 15,000, but its political reach extended across much of the Yucatan. It wasn't just a city, it was the head of a league, a confederation of towns and polities that acknowledged its authority. The League of Mayapan was, in its own way, an experiment in collective rule, a web of alliances that bound the region together. It didn't always run smoothly, what political alliance ever does, but it shows how Maya politics evolved after the fall of divine kingship in the south. Religion, too, continues to evolve. The feathered serpent Kukulkan remains prominent, blending Maya and Toltec traditions. Temples still resound with drums, conch shells, and chants. Bloodletting continues, though often less monumental, more localized. Sacrifices, animal and human, are still performed at cenotes, keeping the gods appeased. Walk through Mayapan's plaza during a festival, and the energy is unmistakable. Dancers leaping, incense burning, nobles striding in feathered cloaks, farmers gawking at the spectacle. Collapse didn't erase the sacred rhythms, it simply reshaped them. In the countryside, everyday life continues with familiar rhythms. Farmers rise before dawn, plant maize, beans and squash, grind kernels on metates, press tortillas over hearth fires. Women weave cotton on backstrap looms. Children fetch water from cenotes. Elders tell stories of gods and ancestors under starlit skies. Walk into a village, and you might forget the collapse ever happened. The forest still hums with cicadas. The hearth still glows. The maize still grows. The endurance of ordinary people is the real backbone of Maya survival. Trade networks keep humming too. Salt from coastal flats, cacao from wetter southern regions, cotton from the Yucatan plains, obsidian from the highlands. All circulate through markets. Canoes ply the Caribbean coast, laden with goods paddled by merchants who memorize coastlines like maps. Ports like Isla Mujeres and Cozumel thrive, not just as trading hubs, but as pilgrimage centers. The Maya are seafarers as much as farmers, their canoes carrying both goods and ideas up and down the coast. You imagine gliding in one of those canoes, turquoise water sparkling, the horizon dotted with sails and paddles, the hum of voices swapping stories and prices. But the post-classic isn't just continuity, it's also innovation. Architecture shifts. Instead of towering pyramids with endless layers, you see smaller, more compact temples. Instead of giant stelae carved with dynastic boasts, you see murals and codices filled with more practical records, calendars, rituals, histories. The art is no less beautiful, but it's more functional, more direct. And political power isn't tied to single kings claiming divine status. Instead, councils of nobles, warrior elites, and merchant leaders share authority. In some places like Mayapan, this means wider participation. In others, it means more infighting. Either way, it's different from the classic world. Not every city thrives. The League of Mayapan itself eventually fractures. By the mid-15th century, civil war breaks out. Factions clash, walls are breached, temples burn. Mayapan collapses around 1440 CE, its walls left crumbling, its league dissolved. But here again, collapse isn't the end. Power splinters into dozens of smaller city-states across the Yucatan, each ruling its own patch of land, each competing, trading, and sometimes fighting with the others. It's like a return to the fractious days of the classic, only on a smaller, more regional scale. And through it all, the people endure. Even as cities rise and fall, villages keep planting maize, families keep weaving, scribes keep marking the passage of time. The Maya world doesn't vanish. It decentralizes, disperses, shifts shape. You realize that the term collapse is too simple, too final. What you're really seeing is transformation, a civilization shedding old forms and growing new ones, like a snake leaving behind its skin but still slithering on. Travel into the highlands of Guatemala, and you'll find another thriving Maya world. Towns like Iximche and Cumaquej rise, ruled by Quiche, Caxiquil, and other Maya peoples. Their plazas fill with markets, their temples resound with rituals, their warriors march with obsidian blades. These highland kingdoms are powerful, sophisticated, and deeply Maya. When the Spanish arrive in the 16th century, it's these towns they encounter, living proof that the Maya never disappeared. Sit in a marketplace in the 15th century, listening to the chatter of merchants, the clang of copper bells, the laughter of children chasing each other between stalls. The smell of roasting maize drifts through the air. You sip a bitter cacao drink, spiced with chili, and you realize the Maya are alive, present, resilient. The collapse you've been tracing is only part of the story. The people adapted, shifted northward, reinvented politics, kept their gods, and carried on. The jungle may have swallowed Tikal, but the Maya themselves never vanished. They are here, in every tortilla pressed over a fire, every prayer whispered to Chak, every canoe slicing across turquoise water. Their legacy is not ruins, it is survival. You've seen how the Maya adapted after the southern cities fell, thriving in the Yucatan, building Mayapan, trading along the coasts, and sustaining vibrant communities. But now we jump forward several centuries to one of the most dramatic encounters in all of history, the arrival of the Spanish. By the early 1500s, the Maya world is still very much alive. Fragmented, yes, but filled with bustling towns, strong warriors, clever traders, and deep traditions. When the conquistadors stumble into this landscape, they don't find ruins, they find people ready to fight, negotiate, and endure. The Spanish first brush against the Maya in 1511 when a shipwreck strands a handful of sailors on the Yucatan coast. Most are captured and sacrificed, but two survive, Gonzalo Guerrero and Geronimo de Aguilar. Guerrero goes on to integrate with Maya society, marrying a local woman, tattooing his face, and becoming a respected warrior. He fathers children who are among the first mestizos, blending Spanish and Maya heritage. Aguilar, by contrast, keeps to his Spanish faith, and later joins Hernán Cortés as a translator. Right from the start, the encounter isn't simple conquest, it's negotiation, adaptation, and blending. When Cortés himself lands in 1519, he faces Maya warriors at Potanchan. Canoes swarm, obsidian blades gleam, and arrows darken the sky. The Spanish muskets and steel cut through, but it's not an easy victory. The Maya fight fiercely, and though defeated in battles, they retreat into forests and continue resistance. You can almost hear the clash, the boom of cannon, echoing against the sharp twang of atlatls, two worlds colliding on sandy shores. The Spanish don't march straight through Maya lands as they did with the Aztec capital. Instead, they find a patchwork of dozens of independent polities. Each town, each region, has its own lords, alliances, and rivalries. The League of Mayapan is long dissolved, leaving the Yucatan divided. For the Spanish, this is both a challenge and an opportunity. Conquest becomes a slow grind, but also a matter of playing rivals against each other, just as Maya kings had done for centuries. Walk through a Maya town in the early 16th century, and you'd still recognize much. Farmers tending maize, women weaving on backstrap looms, markets bustling with cacao, salt, honey, and cotton. Priests oversee rituals, scribes mark calendars, warriors drill in plazas, but there's also a new tension. Whispers of strangers with strange weapons. Strangers who claim to carry a god stronger than Chark or Kukulkan. Rumors ripple faster than armies, unsettling villages, long before Spanish banners appear. The conquest of the Maya is not swift. Unlike Tenochtitlan, which falls in 1521, Maya resistance stretches for nearly 2 centuries. That's right, 2 centuries. From 1520s skirmishes in the Yucatan to the final conquest of Noxpatan in Guatemala in 1697, the Maya fight, flee, rebel, and resist again and again. Take the Itzar at Lake Petén. Itzar in Guatemala. They maintain independence for generations after much of Mesoamerica has fallen. Their capital, Nogpetén, sits on an island, protected by water, filled with temples and palaces. Spanish expeditions try and fail to take it. It isn't until 1697, with cannons mounted on boats, that the Spanish finally conquer the city. Imagine it, centuries after the so-called collapse, a Maya city-state still thriving, still resisting, still forcing invaders to work for every inch. Resistance isn't always open war. Sometimes it's subtle, withdrawing into forests, refusing to pay tribute, secretly continuing rituals under the guise of Christian practice. A priest might think he's looking at a Catholic saint's shrine, but beneath the veneer the people still whisper prayers to Chak or Ixchel. Syncretism takes root, blending Maya and Christian beliefs into a resilient hybrid. Outwardly the Spanish impose their gods, inwardly the Maya adapt, bending but never breaking. Of course, the conquest brings devastation. European diseases sweep through, killing untold numbers who never even see a Spaniard. Smallpox, measles and influenza carve holes in communities, leaving towns half empty, families shattered. Hunger follows, tribute demands rise, and the old rhythms are broken. The scale of loss is unimaginable, the grief palpable. You walk through a village struck by plague, hear the silence of houses where laughter once echoed, and feel the weight of tragedy. And yet, even here, the Maya endure. New towns are founded, old traditions slip into new forms. Languages persist. The Spanish build churches atop temple ruins, but the people still gather, still remember, still carry their heritage forward. The maize keeps growing, tortillas keep pressing, stories keep passing from elders to children. The Spanish chroniclers often write of conquering the Maya. But when you stand in a market centuries later, hearing Maya languages spoken, seeing women weaving horpioles with ancient patterns, tasting chocolate spiced with chili, you realize the truth. Conquest was never complete. The Maya bent, adapted, absorbed, but they did not vanish. In fact, the Spanish presence highlights how deeply rooted Maya resilience is. For every city burned, another village keeps planting. For every codex destroyed by missionaries, oral traditions keep stories alive. For every forced conversion, prayers continue in whispers, blending saints with gods, crosses with ceiba trees. Survival becomes its own quiet rebellion, as powerful as any battle. As you leave the ruins of a burned temple and walk into a modern Maya village, you see continuity. Children laugh, women weave, men return from fields with baskets of maize. The people remain, carrying with them the weight of centuries, but also the strength of endurance. The Spanish invasion marks another wave of upheaval, but like droughts, wars and collapses before, the Maya adapt and continue. The so-called end of the Maya world is never really an end. It's another transformation, painful and profound, but not final. And when you sit under the shade of a ceiba tree, listening to elders tell stories that blend gods, saints, ancestors and heroes, you realize the Maya are still here. They always have been. The jungles of the southern lowlands are quiet now, the great plazas overgrown, the temples home to bats and vines. Chichen Itza has risen and fallen, Mayapan has fractured, the Spanish have conquered, and centuries of struggle have passed. But here's the thing that may surprise you most. The Maya are not gone, far from it. Millions of people across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras and El Salvador still speak Maya languages, still plant maize and beans, still honor ancestors, still weave patterns that carry the memory of gods and kings long past. The collapse was never extinction, it was transformation. Walk into a village in the Yucatan today, and you'll hear Yucatec Maya spoken in the streets. Children call to one another in the same rhythms you might have heard 1,000 years ago in Tikal's plazas. Women wear embroidered huipiles, white tunics adorned with bright flowers, patterns that echo ancient designs found on murals and carvings. Men tend milpas, small plots of maize, beans and squash, just as their ancestors did with digging sticks and stone hoes. The tools are modern now, metal machetes, plastic buckets, but the rhythm is the same: plant, weed, harvest, give thanks. In highland Guatemala, you step into bustling markets in towns like Chiquicastenango. The air is alive with color, rows of woven cloth in reds, blues, yellows, and purples. Each pattern is specific to a community, carrying identity across generations. The smell of incense wafts from church steps, where women kneel to pray. But look closely and you see that the prayers are not just Catholic, they're also Maya. Candles burn in colors aligned with the 4 cardinal directions. Offerings of maize and flowers lie at the feet of saints. The line between church and temple blurs, and you realize you're witnessing continuity disguised as conversion. Language is one of the clearest legacies. There are more than 30 distinct Maya languages still spoken today, from Quiche and Kaqchikel in Guatemala to Yucatec Maya in Mexico. Millions of speakers keep them alive, passing them to children, resisting the erosion of centuries. Each carries a worldview, a way of naming stars, plants, gods, and histories. When you hear someone count in base 20, or describe the maize god in casual conversation, it's a reminder that the Maya never disappeared. They're talking right next to you. And then there's knowledge. The Maya calendar, so precise it could predict eclipses, is still remembered and used by daykeepers. These spiritual guides track cycles of 260 days, each with its own significance, advising communities on auspicious times for planting, marriages, or journeys. Astronomy, ritual, and daily life remain intertwined. Even after centuries of colonization, modern science validates what Maya priests knew long ago. The cycles of sun, moon, and stars shape the rhythms of the earth. The struggle to preserve codices is tragic. Only 4 confirmed Maya books survive today, scattered in European libraries. Missionaries like Diego de Landa burned countless others, seeing them as pagan. But knowledge didn't die with the flames. Scribes and priests carried it orally, embedding it in stories, weaving it into rituals. Later, Maya intellectuals wrote their histories in Latin script, blending old and new. The Popol Vuh, the great Quiche creation story, survives because it was written down this way in the 16th century. Reading it, you still meet the hero twins, still hear of maize as the substance of humanity, still glimpse the cosmology that shaped kings and farmers alike. Resilience is not just cultural, it's political. Throughout colonial rule, Maya communities rebelled, resisted, and negotiated. The caste war of Yucatan in the 19th century saw Maya fighters hold territory against Mexican forces for decades, establishing their own autonomous state at Chan Santa Cruz. Even when outgunned, they refused to vanish quietly. Their descendants still tell stories of that resistance, proud reminders that collapse is never total. Modern Maya communities face challenges: poverty, discrimination, loss of land, but they also thrive. Tourism brings visitors to ruins like Tikal and Chichen Itzá, and Maya guides tell stories in their own words. Festivals honor both saints and gods, blending drums with church bells. Scholars and activists fight to preserve languages, to protect sacred sites, to assert identity in nations that too often overlook them. When a child in Guatemala learns to read Quiché, or when a family in Belize plants maize under prayers to both Jesus and Chark, you see continuity, adaptation, and survival braided together. Walk through a Maya town today, and the echoes of history are everywhere. The saber tree still stands tall in plazas, its roots imagined as bridges to Fabalba, its branches touching the heavens. The ball courts may be ruins, but children still play with rubber balls in dusty streets. Women grind maize on stone metates, the same rhythm their ancestors kept. Farmers watch the skies, still hoping for rain, still whispering to the gods of water. The collapse was never the end, it was a turning of the page. The Maya are not ruins, they are people, alive and enduring, with voices that carry across centuries. As you stand at the base of a temple, staring up at weathered stone covered in vines, remember that the story isn't about what was lost, it's about what survives. Because tonight, as you drift into sleep, the story of the Maya isn't a ghost tale of vanished cities, it's a lullaby of endurance, whispered in maize fields, sung in markets, written in the stars. And as long as people speak Maya languages, plant maize, and tell stories of gods and ancestors, the civilization has not vanished. It never will. The torches are out, the plazas are silent, and the jungle hums softly around you. The story of the Maya has carried you across centuries, through glittering courts and smoky rituals, through fields of maize and years of drought, through collapse and conquest, and finally into the living present. Now as the night deepens, it's time to let the echoes fade into a gentler rhythm. Breathe in, slowly. Imagine the warm air of the Yucatan, scented with wood smoke and earth after a light rain. Picture the outline of a saber tree, its roots deep, its branches reaching toward the stars. Each branch carries a thread of the story you've heard. Farmers planting, kings bleeding, scribes carving, rebels resisting, children laughing. The branches sway together, reminding you that history isn't a single line, but a living canopy, vast and interwoven. The ruins in the jungle are quiet, but not empty. They hum with memory, with continuity, with resilience. The Maya world never vanished. It simply changed, adapted, endured. And so, as you close your eyes, imagine yourself lying in a hammock, the stars above wheeling across the sky, the same constellations the Maya charted with such care. The cicadas sing, the air grows cooler, and your body relaxes into stillness. Let the last image be gentle: a farmer pressing tortillas in the morning light, a child chasing a ball through a dusty street, a grandmother whispering stories of gods and heroes. The past and present blend, soft and steady, until all that remains is the sound of your breath, rising and falling like the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. The story is finished now. You are safe. You can rest. Good night. Sweet dreams.